these
Yeah,
details.
yeah. So just to recap, your father in this lifetime, you were like a lady, she was not of royal, status, and then married into like a lesser cousin to you. And then that person tragically died. There were no children. And so you ended up taking her in, and there was just, I mean, this is a person with just a very grandiose ego, right? Like
Yeah,
a childlike, insatiable need for all that is like astrally desired in the world. You know what I mean? Like fame, like money, all the riches, all the power, everything, just like really out of control.
yeah. He seems that way in this lifetime too, like
Yeah, because
very demanding of everything. And
yeah.
he has this like kind of power and over his family and patriarchy. And
Mhm.
I just don't accept that and I don't live by those rules.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's like he couldn't bring me down to
Yeah.
put me in my place or something.
Yeah. 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 So it's like, you know, he feels like you basically make him feel less than because you're not operating in the patriarchy, you're operating from your dignified soul. Right. That's why I'm saying it's like the royalty doesn't live in a patriarchal system in you. It lives in your soul's ancestry, meaning that
Right.
the blood has now translated into your soul DNA, right? It's not, you weren't just royalty and acted like an asshole. You were a royalty that really understood the quality of what it took to be, to have that kind of dignity, right? And that's a very powerful thing to embody the soul's dignity and to value yourself and to stand with that kind of stature. You know what I mean? You can always rise above in that situation, and you're not going to be taken in by pettiness and politics and people's squabbles and power issues. And so he's up against it. There's no doubt. With you as his daughter this time. Very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So now how do I detach and decouple myself from him, her?
So let me just look. Give me a second. I think that part of it is like, I mean, in some ways, it's like you just need to not worry yourself with this situation. You need to take the information I've given you just now, and you need to just make peace with like this poor little soul that keeps expressing itself as just so much more pathetic than it really is. Right. And
Right.
I think you just need to kind of like pat it on the head and don't trouble yourself too much from like, in some ways, ignore it. You know what I mean? Because it's of no consequence to you spiritually.
Right.
Right. And so it's like negligence is a better, like not neglect, but like benign neglect. Like just ignore it a little bit. It's like,
Okay.
okay, poor little soul. Like you're like a young soul that hasn't sorted it out yet. Don't mind yourself. Just, go off there and play. Like there's not a lot that you need to do because it's not really impacting you all that much. I think it's more the framework of the fact that he's your father bugs you a little bit because it's like you just need to like sort of like you're wearing this hat that this is like your father, so therefore you're supposed to do something, and you just need to take off the hat. Like it's
Okay.
not such a big deal, really, spiritually speaking. It may feel like a bigger deal in your life, but at a soul level, you're so much more like the vastness between how much light you're generating and what you can generate versus what this person is capable of. It's so vastly different, right? So I think if you can just sort of settle into that experience a little bit, you'll feel
Okay.
like it's not such a big deal.
Okay. And so that's really fascinating. Thank you.
Mhm.
I accept. Um, and in terms of my other past lives, I would love to hear more about my other experiences and what that means for me now or how I can use it to my benefit.
Okay, so I mean, like, it's interesting that this is the thing that you wanted to talk about, because, like, I'm not really like, I'm not a psychic reader. Like, I'm able to do all of that, but that's not really like what I do for people. Typically, I only use them, like, for you, like, this is an important thing for you to know, right? Like, so I just want to be clear that, I'm going to tell you the ones that feel like they have some consequence to your life right now.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, I'm not just gonna, like, read your Akashic records just because I can, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Just to be clear.
And I trust that you're going to tell me things that are of value based on your
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, so it's like, I'm just gonna pull the files on, like, what's important for you right now.
Okay.
Okay. So just give me a second.
Sure.
So, I feels like the most important, I've actually looked at the lifetime yet, but I'm just gonna tell you what the issue is, because I look at it more from the issue. Is that, like, the most recent memory of a lifetime. So, I'm not going to talk about past life. Is kind of interesting. It's an interesting way to say it, because in fact, when we deal with the soul, there really is no time and space. So the lifetimes lay impressions, but they're not really identified with time,
Okay.
right? So past life is not really, it's not really accurate to say it that way, but we use that terminology because it's not the life we're experiencing in the here and now that we're talking to each other from. So,
Right.
I'd say the most recent impression is that there was a very unfulfilling experience that is having a consequential impact on you now, that manifests really as a fear and as of grief, and, like, disillusionment can happen too, where you didn't really get to express your gifting in that lifetime.
Mhm.
You had to make a lot of sacrifices for your family, and you were a man in that lifetime, and I think you had to work very hard, but you couldn't really fulfill, like, your inner heart's desire. And so there's a lot of fear associated with, like, not being able to achieve a certain amount of enlightenment that would come by fulfilling your gifting.
Okay.
So there's just this pressure that I can feel, like, around being able to achieve success in that way.
Right.
Um
Spiritually, you mean?
yeah, it has to do with, like, feeling rewarded by expressing your gifts,
Right.
because, like, there's some clarity that, like, when you're fulfilling when we have gifts, the gifts are not really ours, they're ours to give, actually, and to be in service to. And so we have to, like, align ourselves with not trying to possess the gifting, but, like, allow the gifting to be cultivated and move through us, so that we are in service to others. And that's really where the enlightenment and the joy comes from, is being of service. Right?
Okay.
That's really what brings certain, that's what gives us enlightenment, really, is through service, right? That gives us joy. It gives us that feeling of being enlightened,
Right.
right? So instead of feeling enlightened in this place, there's, like, pressure because it was unfulfilled before.
Right.
And there's still some part of the challenge for you in that lifetime was, is that there was, you created, or there was some confusion that got created, because you really got this idea in your head that what you were doing was not fulfilling your purpose in some ways. So you really didn't see that the lifetime could have been fulfilling for you,
Right.
even if you didn't get to express other aspects of your gifting, right? And therefore, and then it sort of cut you off from different destinies or different ways of understanding how that gifting could have been manifested in other ways. Right? Like, so for example, I'll give you I give you a sense of what I mean. Like, some people think that, like, okay, so like I can see people's past lives, right? And some people think like, wow, how do you do that? Like, it's so interesting. It's like so cool. Like, how did that happen? And well, it's a gift, right? And like, and I don't know if everyone can do it, but it's certainly something that I was able to tap into. But like, if I wasn't expressing that gift, part of what I'm doing when I'm seeing people's past lives is I'm really seeing into their soul.
Right.
Right. And so I don't need to tell you what your past life is to be able to say those things, to tell you those things.
Right.
Right. So I could find ways to communicate that knowledge in a different way. And I could also change the way in which I make that information palatable to somebody who wouldn't be open to past lives.
Right.
Right. So I could do it just by being with, like, so I could use the information to cultivate a level of presence in myself, as opposed to getting angry about the fact that nobody wants, that I couldn't be a psychic or reader or whatever, if I was limited in that way or something. Maybe I lived in a place where nobody would pay me for something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think I understand.
So there was some confusion in that lifetime. You got kind of depressed. Right. And so I think that's the place that you need to kind of unlock, is the fear and the pressure around it, and like making sure that you're not still hanging on to fear of not, like, it's like the fear is associated with the confusion.
Right.
Right. And so it's like, how can you best know your gifts and express them fully, knowing that there are ways to express them all the time, whether you're doing them for work or getting paid for them or not. Like, what is the essence of those gifts? And can you feel enlightened just by that clarity instead of the confusion, and really feel that gifting can uplift you in a moment to moment way, instead of feeling like you're somehow limited because of opportunities, because of whatever it might be that would be limiting you.
Right.
Am I making
So
sense to
right.
you?
Yeah. So right now, for example, I'm working on my business and, getting out there and becoming a coach, or, seeing myself as a coach and becoming certified. And, really putting myself out there. That's one of the things I'm working on, is not being afraid to speak about what I'm doing and be open and actually work towards it, because it's something that I love doing. Versus allowing myself to go into a dark place to demand of myself that I must be successful in this, or else I'm not fulfilling my purpose. Is how
Yeah.
I'm understanding that.
Yeah, and I think maybe even just a step, I think that's great, but I think even a step before that, yes, for sure. I think that is it. But what might be a good step to look at just before that is um really understanding first of all, what your gifting is, your relationship to that gifting, right? Because if you're going to be a coach, you want to understand what you're actually best at, right? Because there are
Right.
coaches that are like, there are all kinds of coaches where, you know, there's nuances, right? And so a lot of your gifting is going to, first of all, there's a quality that you have that is just untouchable, right? Which is this quality of being this regalness, because basically what you have is you have self-worth, right? You have a core sense of self, and you have self-worth, and you have you're dignified. There's a dignity intrinsically already intact in you. And I can tell you from having done this for 20 years, you got plenty of people you can help. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
most people, particularly women, who are mostly people that come into relationship with coaches. I mean, not to say that there aren't men, but this is like the main thing that's wrong with people, or not wrong with them, but what they feel is off in their lives is that people have no core they have no core self-esteem. You don't have that issue.
Right.
And it's also for you, it's not coming from, this is something you've already cultivated, right, in a
Right.
past life. It's not psychological self-esteem. It's just that the soul is intact and dignified and vibrating at that dignity. Like that's the regalness, right? And that's because you cultivated it, right? And there's no amount of can take lifetimes to cultivate something like that. And that's not going to, you could lose it by putting yourself in abusive relationships, you know what I mean? But you're not going to lose the dignity is always there. It's just whether or not the expression is as bright as it is.
Right.
Right. And so one thing that you could hone your business on is helping people, achieve, and you're obviously going to find your own language around this, but knowing that because you're a person who already resides in valuing yourself at this very core level, it would be very easy for you to help other people figure that out, using whatever
Right.
tools and techniques they need, because you have the vibration of that already. It's very hard for somebody who doesn't have that vibration to offer it to somebody else.
Right.
Does that make sense to
Okay.
you?
Yes. Yes.
So you can certainly work
So
with
so
that.
so I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
How do I get to really understand what my gifts
Well, that's one of them right there.
are? Okay.
I mean, you're gifted in, understanding the dignity of the soul. So when you're coaching people, you're going to basically be able to dig in to where they are feeling ill dignified or undignified. Right. And your father has been an incredible teacher for you in this regard, because he's such a little fucking shit, And so, I mean, he's just such an unevolved, spoiled, bratty child of a soul, right?
Yeah.
And he's just such a little shit,
It's
right?
so hilarious. So everybody like what they say about him, anybody who comes across his energy. It's just so funny to hear somebody actually say all the things I've thought my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like a little brat, like, and it's just, he's like he's like a caricature of like the bad kid on a cartoon, right? He's like a caricature of that at a soul level. Like it's not, and then he's sort of masking up as like the patriarch, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's such a joke, right? So, and the funny thing is that you have so much dignity and so much regality that you're vibrating at, that you literally just have to go like this and it's done, right? There's just no, it's just that, like, take him away. Like, it's like, you know what I mean? Go in the other room and play. Like, it's like, there's just very little that you need to do to get him to get him to swat. You have to sort of shoo him off, right? And so that gives you a sense of like, you're going to meet a lot of people like your dad, and who are much less troubled than he is, much less. But if you take him as kind of like the hardest, patient X, you know what I mean, client X, right? And what you see in his evolution and where he stumbles and where there's been a lack of progress, and all of his attachments to the seven deadly sins, you know what I mean? And people's need for glamour over dignity,
Hmm.
right? I mean, this is a gift. I mean, because you don't have that issue in quite the same way. And I'm not saying you don't have issues, but you have fear about not being successful for sure, or achieving success. But it's not really just monetary success. It's not really monetary. It's really about the fulfillment of your heart's desire. Right. And that's because, again, this confusion came up around not recognizing that, like, the process is fulfilling, actually, if you stay aligned with, the learning of each step, along the way. If you stay aligned with being a student and a child of divine presence, then you're always able to stay in a much more regal position, because you're embodying the dignity of the soul's work.
Right.
Right. So, and you already know that, but I think where you lost track of it is more in the process of the work of it. So you're getting to do that in this life. Right. And so it's not so much that the gifts are like disseminating down to you that you then regally, sort of, absolve people of their pain. It's more in that you're going to have to get more in the grittiness of what that looks like, right? And the kind of, you could think of it as like, Zen, the Zen, the Japanese are great at this, right? The Japanese the Zen Buddhists and people who function in Japanese culture, they have such a pristine way of doing the mundane. And it's quite beautiful. I'm not saying that you need to do it that way, but you might partake in seeing cultures that know how to function in this very day-to-day way, but bring this quality of enlightenment to every process.
Okay.
Right. And that's kind of the manifestation of the gifting. And so what happens in that process is that the gifting becomes more obvious too. Right.
Okay.
Like we don't, I don't think we chase down our gifts. They kind of announce themselves and then we figure out how we relate to them so that we can stay in a more pristine place in ourselves. Right. And not get into a tussle with them. I mean, you can see so many examples of people who are quite gifted or talented, just their lives are just a mess, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
they're given too much too soon and they're not integrated around the gift and they think they are the gift. They don't understand the gift's there to be given. You know what I mean? There's a lot of confusion around that. So I would say right relationship first, opening to what the gifting is, right relationship to that gifting. And for you, there's something about the day-to-day process of, again, dignifying the process, not just the kind of regalness from which is possible, right? It's like now you're getting to play with like, how do I bring this to a process, into people's healing process, into their transformative process? So you're having to understand that more in this life
Right.
and not being turned off by that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Process. Yeah. So really, kind of take that understanding and knowing that by bringing that dignity to the process every day, that it's fulfilling
Yeah.
that gift.
Yeah, you're fulfilling it, you're cultivating it, you're bringing fresh energy to what channels can open to yourself. Like that's part of it. There's a wonderful phrase that I use all the time, which is like, you know, um having the dignity of your process, right? Because
Right.
the process is dignified, but we all have to dignify the process. So it's just like, how do you take your awareness about dignity of the soul and apply that to a process so that other people gain um, their own awareness of their own dignity? So if you can dignify the process as you're facilitating and you're giving them homework and you're giving them whatever feedback or questioning, that you bring that, you have an intention to keep up leveling the dignity of the process, right? That really teaches someone something.
Right.
I
Wow.
think you'll be excellent at that. So it's translating that thing that you already have into a process for others and really making your templates and your processes for people that you're coaching. So you're going to give them worksheets and homework and shit like that, really like making sure it sustains and maintains that place that you have already cultivated. So it's like you have to go almost backwards, like
Okay.
and kind of create a process for what you already have, right,
Right.
through that vibration. And so you're not having to get there, you're having to work it backwards the other way, which is kind of how it happened to me too. It's like I had to kind of um with some things I had to like, I was very different than most of the people that come to see me. I wasn't so in my head, right? I was
Right.
pretty embodied when it was not easy. It was not hard for me to stay present with my processes. Like meditation was never hard for me. Being embodied was not. And so many people I have come see me, they're just so in their head. So I had to create processes that were not ones that, I mean, there were things I had to do, but I did them so quickly. It was so easy for me in some ways, because of the circumstances. So I had to really flesh out for other people ways to work with things that were really not problems for me as much.
Right.
Right. So it's like this interesting manifestation. And then there's, just appreciating the work of that, for you.
Right.
That
And
makes
as
sense.
you're saying all that, I'm trying, absolutely. My mind goes to, okay, what do I need to do with that? What do I need to do with that? It's amazing. I'm definitely going to need to talk to you again
Yeah. Yeah.
multiple times for sure. Cause um, I think I understand. I'm not sure I'm fully processing everything that you're saying.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, but yeah, and I'm so curious. So, how do you normally work with people? Because I just asked the past life question kind of directly. So, how would you
Yeah.
normally work with people?
Well, you sent me an intake form. It's fine. People can ask me whatever they want. You know what I mean? Like, it just depends. Typically people come to me, you know, I sort of, because, a lot of people come on referral, but, it just, I don't like to, I don't really advertise myself as like some kind of psychic reader healer person because I don't really think that's where the real work, that's not really what I'm interested in. I'm really interested in people being embodied and empowered. And I'm
Right,
interested in people understanding how embodiment changes healing, transformational, and educational spaces. Right. And so that's really what is at the root of like what gives me juice is like
right,
creating safe containers for big groups and facilitating processes and consciousness. Right. And then when I work on one, that tends to begin with people's trauma.
okay,
Right. And so because if there's trauma, then there's limited perception.
right,
Right. And so I do have these other, so I don't really have, there's not really a lack of a functional range for me in terms of like, is it ancestral? Is it past life? Is it from this life? Like, because trauma can be carried over from lifetime to lifetime. It can also be carried
yeah,
over ancestrally. It could also be carried collectively in larger kind of groups of people, not just like one's own personal ancestors. Right.
right,
So they can be more kind of continental, global trauma and all kinds of ways in which so that's kind of how I work with people in general. Um, but I'm happy to answer. It's not hard for me to answer the question that way. And sometimes it's easier actually because somebody has a sense of what they are landing in themselves. You know what I mean? And then it gives me a direction to go with. And, I kind of can see what's on this, what the first layer is. Sometimes people come and they just want me to find what's there. And so we do it that way. So I just trust that the layer that needs to be worked with is coming up. Does
okay.
that make
So,
sense?
yeah, absolutely. So, what's coming up for me mostly then?
Well, I think that this was like the major part is that like, being able to trust your own process, and have these pieces named. I don't think that I don't know what kind of coaching program you're in right now, but you're not going to end up doing other people's work. You'll end up doing your own work, right? Because
Okay,
this like this energy that is there, you're going to end up developing your own process. And it's, I think, very helpful to work with a niche, right? And because this is a big challenge for people. I've been doing this
right,
a long time. People really, women particularly, or I work with men too, but like we don't live in a culture in Western society where we value ourselves. Right.
right,
And you may have your own psychological challenges around this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that you don't have your own self esteem issues, your self worth issues, whatever, but you don't have them nearly at all close to what other people have them. And so this is a
right,
gift, right? And it's a gift you cultivated in many lifetimes. And it's going to be your bread and butter, basically, for how you take this up level your profession to be giving the kind of coaching you want to give. Right. And, you know, so I would really think about, this not from a place of like, well, how do I do that? How do I solve that problem? More as a creative process. Like, what are you interested in helping people understand and do? like, you were kind of laughing, like we were laughing about like your dad and like how you could just like flick him off, like, you know what I mean? Like just shoo him away from this very like regal kind of like hand waving. Right. And I think that that's sort of how much further along you are around this issue than most people, right? Particularly because you're Latin, right? And for Latin women, for a Latin woman to tell her dad to do this, that's a big deal, right? And so, and I think even for, just culturally speaking, working with the Latin female community on showing them how to say bye to the patriarchy is a huge deal.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a whole market here and a whole demographic for designing and understanding the cultural repercussions and implications of Latin women dealing with the patriarchy. Right. And how do you walk a woman from that kind of ancestry into the dignity of her heart? Right. Because I've worked with a few, I live in LA. So of course I've worked with plenty of, mixed race or Latin race, people of Latin descent in one country or another. You know what I mean? Right. I've had a nanny who's Latin. I've had, housekeepers who are Latin. I've had a whole gamut, clients, everybody, right? Friends. And without a doubt, most of these women, or at least some of them almost all of them have experienced alcoholism and abuse from the men in their family.
Of course, yeah.
So I think that there's a whole, capacity here for you to, and I'm not saying you should only work with Latin women. Understand what I'm saying. I'm just saying this because you're an anomaly, a true anomaly in the race that you showed up with in this lifetime. Right? Because you're not like highfalutin upper class woman. So you care about the common kind of experience. You're not like coming from, some rich government in Venezuela and then like, you know what I mean? Because I've seen those women too, who are like Argentinian or like, very white and very rich and come from the governments and the family government, where they're they're not royalty, but they act like royalty. Right. And they don't want to intermingle with the lower classes of their own culture. You know what I mean? Because they look white, all that kind of, all the shit that goes on.
Yeah. It's the same damn racism for
totally
all over the world.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And then they're the upper class of Argentina and are, of, whatever, Venezuela. I mean, this happens in every country. So in any case, you're kind of like the people's princess, right? So you have this capacity to kind of embody regalness, but teach the common woman, you know what I mean, how to not abuse themselves or feel like they need to be treated that way. So that's really, I can tell you right now as a coach, like, I mean, I'm not a coach in that way. I'm more of like a trauma therapist is how I like to coin myself. But like, if you have a niche for what you're doing, now you can extend that to all different populations, but because this is your own history and your own experience, and there's such a need for it. There's such a need for it. So it's like, how do you break down coming back into dignity? So go backwards through the process, right? And that's not something you need to solve right now. You just need to be open to developing those processes, always with the place of the value and the dignity of the soul. And how do you come back into how do you walk somebody through that process and back into relationship with that place that you came already in this lifetime with as a gift?
Mm-hmm. And I'm also, I think I can see definitely the patriarchy piece, but also the emotional abuse that comes with that kind of a mindset.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just gnarly what Latin women go. I mean, it's really. I mean, for me, like when I see it, I mean, I've seen it so much in different ways, like my housekeeper used to tell me she was from El Salvador, I think. Yes. And she used to tell me, she, 8 brothers and sisters, and her dad just to beat the shit out of them, just like get drunk and beat the shit out of them. And their mother would just like absorb it all. And like, you know what I mean? And I've heard this story half a dozen times from, over the last 15 years of working with people. Like, this is what happens in these countries. And I'm not saying it's all men's fault, but it's just horrific. The repetitive,
There's just no respect for women
yeah,
as equals, as beings, as
right.
deserving of any level of respect.
Right, except for to like cook and take care of and absorb all their pain and their violence and take care of the children, and then the mothers can't even take care of their children, and then they have their early death, and then the kids are neglected and then abused because they can't protect them from from this abusive, violent father who's an alcoholic
Yeah.
often, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much stuff. And wow, this is phenomenal. Like I really wanted to hear you mirroring back so much of what my experience is and what you've seen, because I'm making the assumption that it's not just from your experience of what you've seen, but also what you can see of my life now.
What do you mean?
Like, do you have the ability to see from my experience from this lifetime?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, we could talk about that part, but that wasn't really where I was saying it from. I mean, it may be resonant from some of the things that happened to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So,
Yeah, it's just so yeah.
yeah, I mean, but you are a Latin woman, and so you didn't
Yeah.
escape the psychological and emotional trauma of that patriarchy,
Yeah,
right?
of the
Right, and so
generations of it,
yeah,
yeah.
that's right, and it's in the field, right? But there's this part of you that is untouched by that and is emerging. And so that's why I say it's like, I wanted to name the place of consequence of the past life where you were feeling unfulfilled, because I want to make sure that you have the dignity of your own process. Like, allow yourself to emerge into this
Right.
coach that you want to be, because you really have to explore your own ancestral history in this way and to understand your place in it in order to kind of integrate your own shadow, your own trauma, and get coherent and complete around what that might be. Now, the thing is, you don't have to resolve it all. You just want to have some facility with it so that you can help other people, because you could help a lot of Latin women. I mean, you could help a lot of people in general, but this is a systemic problem for Latin women.
Right.
Right, and they really need to rise up. I mean, there's just no doubt in my mind. Like, I am so tired of seeing Latin women who are
Well,
just one generation out from, their parents came to, California, and they can't deal with their abuse issues.
yeah, and it's like it hides under the guise of caring for the family and being part of the
Mhm.
family, so it keeps them trapped.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, what else do you have to tell me?
What else do you want to talk about?
Well, I have a couple things going on. So I'm doing some one-on-one coaching with she's helping me work, even though in my coaching mastery course where I'm going to get certified, they do support you in like getting the business side down,
Yeah.
not kind of personal support. So I've taken this other opportunity where I'm getting that additional support.
Great.
And I just a lot of right now what I'm trying to figure out is like my products and my like my offering and my niche and all of that. So what other gifts would I benefit from tapping into, um or like really honing in on and developing so that I can be successful in this coaching business?
So I would say that, okay, so I'm just going to say this the way it is. Like, do you already feel like you're pretty intuitive, and like you feel like, do you ever feel like you get like psychic impressions, anything like that? Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, even though,
sometimes.
yeah. Okay, so I would say this. I don't really think that I would not focus, because literally you have the mother of all gifts. Okay, there is
Okay.
no other greater gift than the one that you have. You could not have come with it in order to be of service to people. So in terms of your gifting, like that shouldn't be an insecurity, or it shouldn't be really what you focus on, because the more you reside in that soul dignity in yourself, and you just are vibrating from like, I already have everything I need, and like I've come with this incredible gift, and you just keep remembering like that a Latin woman can do this to her father's soul, because that is the thing
Yeah.
that needs to happen, because it's not abusive, it's not violent. It's like putting the hierarchy where it belongs,
Right.
right? The spiritual hierarchy is what matters here, not these thousands of years of patriarchy of abused women. This is not where we're going to come from,
Right.
right? And it's so necessary for you to land in that. And look, I could extend that into just women in general, right? Like that could, because we've all been suffering from patriarchy for a long time. So to be able to land in that, like there is no other gift like that's necessary,
Okay.
right? Like what else could you possibly need? You don't need any other gift. And if your intuition and your psychic impressions, I get a sense. So I like to think about things in terms of like three layers of skills that are connected to gifts, right? One is
Right.
psychic impressions, right? One is intuition, because those are different things. And then one
Okay.
is like your instinctual energy, your instincts, your gut instincts. I would say of those three, your gut instincts are probably the least firm,
Yeah.
right? And that's something that you want to work with, because you want to be able to work, you want to be able to generate instinctual power when you need it. Now,
Right.
you may shy away from that because the patriarchy that you grew up in violently abused that ability, right?
Right.
And so it may be a little bit, so you want to clear any judgments you have about, being able to call people out,
Right.
right? Like you don't need to call your dad out. You can do this with your dad, but there's going to be another time where you have to cut somebody's nuts off, and you have to know how to do that too.
Right.
Like if you want to be a coach, you want to be a good coach, you have to be able to do that too.
Right.
Because I don't really see you facilitating people just one on one. I see you working in bigger groups of people, honestly,
Okay.
over time. Like I could see you putting together coursework for people, groups of Latin women that you work with that help them with their self esteem issues and all that.
Okay.
Right. I don't see you just
Yeah.
working. I mean, maybe down the road, I'm not saying right now, but I think you could really develop a system, a process. And I think you should really think about it in terms of going big that way. So I think if you can focus on like the kind of the dignity and that gifting that's already there, just let it generate and fill up the other places. And really, I would think more about it in terms of skills, honing skills that help you communicate what it is your process is for people. And part of that is understanding more your own process for what gives you that sense of dignity in yourself. Now, it comes naturally to you. So you're going to have to really kind of think about this, and not in an impatient way, but you have to really consider what that means and what questions, what kind of inquiry do you want to ask yourself to help understand how you got to that place?
Right. A lot of looking inward.
Yeah. And then the inquiry questions that you get the answers from become part of the templates that you offer other people.
Okay.
So you can say, I mean, I teach a lot of online courses and a lot of growth courses like this. So I think that that's something that you'll be very good at. And I think
Okay.
there'll be the definite need for this, like for, you know what I mean? Because I think your own story is so common to a Latin woman's story. Right.
Yeah.
And so by sharing that and getting really good at telling it and really coherent about it in your marketing materials and everything about you, I would not shy away from being very niche, in the sense
Okay.
that you're going after women who are, 25 to 60, who are interested in personal growth, understanding cultural and family issues are affecting their self-esteem and their relationships, and that with a bend on being a Latin woman, I would not shy away from that at all. because
Okay.
God knows there's enough Latin women who in this world that need this kind of help.
Yeah, and truthfully, if it wasn't for my Canadian partners, family, then has elevated me to a very different point and perspective of myself,
So great.
to like support me and that feeling of
Hmm.
like I deserve better.
Yeah.
I don't know, like where I would be, like if I would have been stuck around the culture, if I wouldn't have had to like just be so distant from it.
Hmm.
I don't know what would have happened. I don't know that I could have maybe had the same progress. I don't know.
Well, I think that you are, like I said, this has always been latent in you. So you
Right.
probably attracted the right kind of guy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
It's
for sure.
like, it's not, I don't think it's just like, oh, willy nilly happened to you. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think it was in there, right? So it is important for you to really get in touch with this more instinctual energy and not to be, um, you don't have to have, you can understand violence as a dangerous force, but you don't have to be afraid of it.
Okay.
Right. Like, of course, we're going to have instinctual fear of violence if it's around us. But
Right.
you have to really change your relationship to violence and not have such an
Right.
aversion to it.
Right.
Right. Because these instinctual energies are going to be really important. You won't be able to do what I'm asking you to do without clearing that part.
Okay.
Because you can't ask a group of people who are afraid of violence to overcome their fears and have self-esteem if they don't confront that part, because it's all living down in that lower chakra area.
Right.
Right, the foundation has to be with the instincts. So because you're cultivated up here in the heart center, you're still going to have to integrate this into your body more and more. So that would be like the work that I think that you're really stepping into, and that of course gives you a foundation for providing wealth and becoming very lucrative at this financially.
Right.
So there's some work here in terms of your own process.
Okay. How do I start?
Well, I,
um,
I would start, again, I mean, there may be some memories from when you were a child, like what's your relationship to violence? Like what's your relationship
yeah.
to abuse? What are the things that you experienced through the patriarchy, both collectively and personally? How did your mother feel that? What's the lineage of your grandmothers? You know what I mean? All of that.
Yeah. Okay. That's amazing. Thank you. I was not expecting so much practical advice.
Well, you got the whole gamut.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what is there anything else that I would benefit from knowing or being aware
I think that it would be good for you to do some kind of work on ancestral stuff,
of?
looking at
Okay.
your ancestry a bit.
Like ancestry, like those online services?
No, 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 no. Like, about like transgenerational trauma, that kind of thing, ancestral.
Yeah,
So there's a
because
book
there is
called,
quite a
yeah,
bit.
there's a book called It Didn't Start With You. It's by a friend of mine. His name is Mark Wolin. You could look at that. Did you want me to put it in the chat?
Yeah, sure.
There you go. How old are you?
I'm 36. I'm going to be 37 next month.
Cool. It feels like this will cover you for a little while. I would just kind of explore some of what we talked about. I
Okay.
mean, you've got time. You know what I mean? You got time.
Okay.
There's nothing to be
All right.
urgent and impatient about. I just think that working out that confusion about not feeling like you need to hurry up and get this gifting thing sorted out, like that, that is That's really your biggest like hurdle, is letting that go
Okay.
and just being
Just
patient.
letting things happen in
Yeah,
their own
because you're
time.
yeah, because you're like golden. Like you don't really, this is really about unfolding and clearing up some old trauma and, really educating yourself a little bit more. And now you have like, this is like a good vision for where to go.
Right.
Right. And it's going to be very rewarding for you because you're going to be able to help a lot of people, especially people of your ancestry and your culture. And that's going to feel deeply rewarding. And it's going to feel like it's very connecting. And you're going to feel like you belong in something larger than just, your family's bullshit.
Yeah, because that's how I feel. It's like I was just kicked out of my family and that's it for me, and I don't have any history.
Right, right. And so this is very restorative. And so you have to allow yourself to belong again, and not, you have to complete with that, like understand that you're carrying more than just your personal stuff. It's not just your personal ancestry. There's other, you don't come with this kind of big gifting it without helping a lot of people, but that requires you to really slow down and back up and really get into letting go of the disconnect and feeling where you belong again, not as your father's daughter, but to a larger understanding of how ancestry can change, right?
Oh
And
my
how
God.
we move things forward in life. So you have to really take the time for the dignity of your own process around that and not rush into having to get somewhere.
That sounds like an amazing title for a book. Not My Father's Daughter.
There's actually, I think there's already a book. I think there's a book called that.
Ah, darn.
You
I'll
can
have
look
to
it
read
up.
it.
Yeah, you can look it up.
Yeah. Okay, so and then the ancestry work, reading this book, and then is there anything else for the ancestry work that you would recommend?
Not right now. Not yet. I think just delve into it a little bit first.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What other words of wisdom do you have for me? You've had so much.
That's it. I think that's good for now. Too much is going to be too much. Just enough is enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. When should we speak again? Usually, how much time should one allow to lapse before you think about doing something like this again?
I mean, it just depends on, what you want to do. Like, I mean, you could do like 3 to 4 weeks, I mean, I gave you a lot of stuff to think about.
Okay.
And it was a lot of big picture stuff. So there may be some more in sitting with this. There may be some like sort of more nitty gritty things that you want to work through next time,
Okay.
specific issues, because this is a lot of like big picture kind of stuff,
Right.
and so it'll be interesting to see what comes up out of that. Yeah, I think I would like for you just to sit with it and see if there's any insights, and then we can schedule something in 3 to 4 weeks, and you can always call me before then if you feel like you want to do more. But
Okay.
I think it would be good just to sit with it for a little while.
Yeah. And probably watch the video again and try to really wrap my head around everything.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to understand it all right now. It's just write down the things that resonate with you and are important, and then just let it go because they're there, and you're doing your program, and you'll have insights and all that kind of stuff. So
Okay. All right. Wow. I feel like I'm forgetting to ask something important, but
it's okay. I'm not
uh,
going anywhere. You can always ask me another time.
okay. Sounds good. Wonderful.